I'll get straight to it. My two brothers-in-law were just detained by the Dare County Sheriff's Office for breaking into my parents' beach house. There's camera footage and an incident report. This isn't family drama anymore, it's B&E, plain and simple. If you only want the quick update, skip to 1042. If you'd like to hear how a classic American family barbecue grilled meat, red Solo cups, sunscreen in the air, kids tearing around, slid into a criminal file, stay with me. I'll start at the beginning. Kate and I don't have kids. Melly and Brooke do enough for a mini basketball team down in the Outer Banks. My dad is usually tinkering with the hot tub on the back deck, and my mom spins between kitchen and patio. I've gotten used to the little digs from relatives. How Daniel must have it easy, living so comfortably. The kind of comment people toss out, especially when you earn a bit more and don't have childcare bills. That day, the ocean breeze was humid. The American flag on the pole snapped and fluttered, and neighbors were getting fireworks ready for the weekend. I told myself, be pleasant for a couple of hours and we're done. I was wrong, very wrong. Here is something you Dantino. The 911 call reporting the break-in did not come from me. It came from my mother. A late afternoon sun in Raleigh slanted across my parents' backyard. The deck boards were warm, the smell of fresh-cut grass mixed with the grill's heat and sweet sauce. The hot tub's pump hummed a steady background. Dad sat near the tub's edge, quiet, like a man guarding the peace. Mom moved short loops between kitchen and patio, trading trays from hand to hand. Emily and Brooke arrived with a flock of kids. Connor and Mike held court at the grill, laughing too loud, talking sports. Kate stood by the picnic table, pouring lemonade and pacing the flow so nothing tipped past the limit. Because Kate and I don't have kids, every gathering puts me on a different rhythm. My eyes sweep for risk. The pool gate latch, wet steps, sharp edges. Table talk drifted quickly to the beach house in the Outer Banks. Peak season costs, the convenience of family dropping in for a few days. I kept quiet and mentally checked the basics the homeowners association requires. Advance notice, parking limits, quiet hours, and an overnight guest cap. My phone buzzed with a short alert, a neighborhood reminder from the homeowners association about keeping evenings quiet. I showed Kate, then set the phone face down. In the kitchen corner, Mom tugged my sleeve and said she had changed the beach house door code after the HVAC service. At the moment, only 3 people knew it. She wanted to lower the odds of any awkward scenes. When I stepped back out, Emily happened to be in the doorway, bright smile and that look that says, "We don't need this many locks with family." I stayed silent. I walked to the pool gate. The spring wasn't snapping cleanly. One twist of a screwdriver, and the metal tightened with a dry, solid bite. The latch dropped into the catch with a neat click. A cool, damp breath rolled off the water as the wind shifted. The side gate gave a faint squeak. Our neighbor, Mrs. Henley, came in holding a glass dish tight under plastic wrap. Warm peach cobbler sent up butter and cinnamon. The kids surged. I caught her wrist as the dish tipped, heard the soft pop of the wrap, the tiny clink of her silver bangles. She exhaled and sat in the folding chair. Mom slid behind her. Kate handed out wipes, reminding the kids to clean their hands before grabbing more food. The noise settled back to normal. Plastic knives rasped through crust. Ice clicked in cups. A red rubber ball rolled off the table and traced the coping along the pool, dry friction like a light chair dragging on wood. I stopped it warm, a little tacky with kid sweat, tossed it back low and rinsed my hands. Mom leaned in with a quieter reminder about quiet hours. I nodded. Once the kids finished eating, the energy pooled in their knees. The ball rolled again. 3 of them sprang up at once. Small feet pounded, sunscreen and crushed grass in the breeze. The pool gate sat between me and the water. I put my hand over the latch, cool air from the pool brushing my wrist. 3 little hands reached at once, one for the latch, one under the catch, one pressing the frame. In a single heartbeat, the background sounds dropped away. A thin click sounded at the latch end. All 3 small bodies kept driving toward the water's edge. That click was as delicate as a fingernail on crystal. I slid my body between the gate and the pool, palm firm on the cold metal catch. The spring pushed back, solid now. The kids hit my side before they could stop, hot, sweaty shoulders and elbows. A wet tile squeaked under a sneaker. I absorbed the momentum and took a half step back, so no one spilled toward the water. Cool vapor lifted against my wrist. Sunscreen and grass brushed my nose. I shut the gate. The latch slid home with a tidy punctuation. One kid was panting, the LEDs in his sneakers blinking with each breath. I knelt and used the towel from Kate to wipe fruit juice from their hands. Less slip, less risk. The backyard noise dipped, then rose again. A single bounce of the red ball, a clink of ice, the hot tub's steady hum trying to hold order. From the grill, adult voices climbed a notch to high joking that keeping kids from running was overdoing it. That wave of sound scraped my ears like sandpaper. Not painful, just irritating. In that second, I felt the house rules being labeled fussy, while putting things away and locking what should be locked was treated like a personal quirk. I checked the gate once more, fingertip along the metal seam for fit. The spring felt even. The pull was consistent. I straightened, shoulder muscles releasing half a notch. Mrs. Henley was settled, her bracelets making a faint, pleasant clink. Mom sat beside her, a steady hand on her elbow. Mom's breathing had slowed, like someone over the hill and catching her breath. The kids redirected to the red ball. The oldest hugged it tight. The other two rocked on their heels like they were at a starting line. Kate gave each a sip of lemonade and said to drink before running. Her low, even tone dialed them down one speed. Sunlight slid across the deck in slow bands. I scooped up extra cups and with my other hand wiped a damp line near the pool edge to cut the slip. One small motion changed the picture. The throw was a touch high. The ball hit the table and glanced off. Dry rubber hissed on wood. It arced toward the water. I took 2 quick steps. The tile felt cooler where the shade had just passed. The kids charged after it, shoes thudding. My palm came down on the ball warm grippy. I pinned it and sent it back on a low path. Safer. My breathing eased. To keep my hands free to wipe up, I set my phone face down on a flat coping stone at the pool's edge. The glass tapped the tile with a tiny hollow note and lay still like a fish just surfaced. Things felt looser. Mrs. Henley sipped water. Her bracelets ticked again. Mom's smile softened at the corners. I bent for a few napkins near the waterline to finish drying the slick spot. 2 things happened at once. The wind shifted a cool band of air off the pool, and the red ball after my low return caught the edge of a casual kick. It curved along its favorite path, not fast, but steady enough to go the distance. I looked up just as the ball kissed the corner of my phone light as a knock. The glass edged a hair over the tile. Sun winked on the water below, the surface quivering like liquid silver. I reached toward it and knew 1 more inch meant a small sound in, everything sliding back toward the water. The light tap landed. The phone tipped, slipped, and fell. The sound was like a drop of ink on paper. The water closed quickly, leaving a thin silver ring. I slipped through the gate and crouched at the pool. Damp, cool air hit my wrist, that sharp disinfectant smell of chlorine. Behind me, 3 little bodies pushed with their momentum. Hot elbows and shoulders bumped my side. A wet squeak from a sneaker on tile. I turned my hips to block, but 2 were already past my reach. A small foot skidded. A small body went in. Water thumped the wall. Second child pitched after, off balance. Another heavy splash. I jumped. The water grabbed like a tight, cold shirt, my ears muffled. Above-ground sounds turned to dim dots. Chlorine burned my nose. My hands searched through white bubbles and found a slick little arm soft as a fish. I locked an arm under a tiny armpit and lifted a head into air. A rough, short cough lungs, reclaiming a bit of room. I turned, found the collar of the second child's shirt, braced a hand at the back of the neck, and tipped the head up. Salt-tasting droplets hit my face. At the edge, Kate was on her knees, arm out like a lifeguard pole. I guided the first child into her reach. Her hand wrapped that small wrist and pulled cleanly. The second went up the ladder with another adult's help and sat wrapped in a towel. 2 small chests rose and fell. Coughs came farther apart. The air up top felt warmer, but chlorine still hung in my throat. I climbed the ladder. Cold streams ran down my back inside my shirt. The volume spiked adult voices riding waves of beer and sauce, demanding why the gate was opened, why I moved so fast, why I always put rules before fun. That sound scraped like sandpaper again. I looked at the 2 kids in towels, shoulders shivering from chill and shock. Drops fell from their hair and ticked on the tile. I ducked back down to took a short dive and retrieved the phone. The glass felt like a fish's back. When I surfaced, water trickled out of the charging port in a trembling line. The screen was black, like a shut-eye. I set it on a tray. The drip sounded like faraway rain. The grown-up noise thickened from loud to heavy. Blame shifted in turns. Mom stood near our neighbor, fingers pressed into each other, nails marking skin. Dad stepped forward like a man setting a weight on a table to keep it from sliding. That small move cut the room's volume by half. I understood. Time to leave before tensions climbed. We did the minimum cleanup. Towels went into a tub, detergent scented the air. I checked the pool gate. Latch seated, spring returning well. The kids trooped inside to change shoes, squeaking thin wet trails. Our neighbor slipped out. The side gate sighed, and her wind chimes breathed. I laid the dead phone in the cup holder, like a piece of evidence that didn't need words. As the tires rolled over the gravel, I glanced in the rear view, the yard shrinking. Late sun on the deck boards, a towel drooping from the rail. My chest still held that hollow left by a long-held breath. The car's AC cooled the last chlorine in the air. At the first turn, Kate's phone buzzed again. The family group chat lit up, first messages pinning the afternoon's detour on me for opening the gate. The next ones jumped straight to the beach house door code for the coming weekend. I looked at that thin strip of blue light on the screen and knew those splashes were only the opening act. The road away from my parents' place got dark faster than I expected. Pine trees stood like needles stitched into the sky. The air in the car still held a thread of chlorine from my wet shirt hanging in back, mixed with warm leather. Kate's phone rested face down in the cup holder, like a lid on a story that refused to close. I tried to settle my breathing, but there was still a cold gap between beats from that plunge. At home, I hung my wet shirt by the washer. Drops hit the floor in slow ticks like a clock that didn't rush. Fresh detergent cut the last chlorine on my wrists. Kate ran the tap. Water beat the sink in even notes. We barely spoke. It wasn't avoidance. It was the kind of quiet that lets a body reset after a jolt. I opened my laptop. Inbox was full of the boring but necessary. A roof repair receipt, hurricane season insurance notices, a vehicle tax reminder, and a general notice from the Outer Banks Homeowners Association about parking in the beach district. Each line was a thread that, if you pulled long enough, showed the framing of a house framing relatives often choose not to see. My parents got that beach house after a windstorm last year. The prior owner needed to sell. The first day I went down, the wood smelled of salt, with a stripe of old paint and drying nets from the neighbor's rail. I sat on the floor by the breaker box and relabeled the faded circuits, then scheduled roof, plumbing, and HVAC checks. Drills hummed like big bees along the siding. None of it was as charming as the beach itself, but those were the reasons the place stands. Emily and Brooke see the house as emotional capital, a gathering center, a place for the kids' memories. I don't object. I just know emotional capital still needs a ledger. Notice ahead, number of cars, quiet hours, overnight guests. The first Memorial Day they came down, sand clung to the floors like sugar on pastry. A group of Emily's friends showed up on the porch as if that were normal. That night, a neighbor knocked about blocked parking. I apologized and moved the car's tires crunching gravel, louder than any posted rule. Dad buys peace with nods. Has to use the house for 2 nights, so the kids can breathe the ocean, and he nods. When the Homeowners Association warns about overflow parking, he plants 2 little signs by the hedge like charms. Mom balances as best she can, hates conflict, soothes with food, laughter, and topic changes. I get both of them. I also know I've become the key holder, scheduling maintenance, meeting techs, labeling, answering notices. It's useful, and at times it's being used like being a mile marker. Folks lean on to turn left, turn right, and occasionally bump into 4 speed. Kate saw it more clearly than anyone. She didn't ask for speeches. She handed me a blank page with 3 lines. Who's allowed in, when, and under what conditions. We wrote the minimums. 48 hours notice. Follow the Homeowners Association rules. No extra friends overnight. A named adult responsible. I took it to my parents. Dad nodded like he'd set a missing brick. Mom watched the kettle steam. My sisters treated it like a kitchen poster from someone eager to coordinate. Beneath their jokes, I heard a thin layer of envy about income and a thicker layer of friction about Kate and me choosing not to have kids. They'll hint that no kids means extra time and money. They skip the part where I'm the one changing locks, replacing bulbs, calling the roofer every single time. There were small signs that told me the boundary was being pushed. One night at 2 a.m., the HVAC system sent an alert that settings had been changed even though the house was on away mode. Another time, the doorbell camera reported a shaky connection right over the weekend, then went back to normal. The next day, I noticed the trash bin tucked back against the wall, even though it wasn't a pickup day. None of those pieces proved anything on their own, but together, they felt like someone had stepped over the doormat without leaving a note. After that afternoon in Raleigh, the family group chat kept bubbling. The messages circled the idea that I'd ruined the fun, that I always put rules first. Somewhere in the noise was a line asking me to send the beach house door code for the upcoming weekend. The tone read more like a directive than a request. I looked at it, set the phone down, and opened the Homeowners Association email again. They'd added a summer reminder about guest parking, advance registration required, a limit on overnight cars, and a warning that violators would be towed. Those lines, combined with the pool gate moment earlier, sketched a short diagram in my head. If I didn't tighten the boundary, a small incident would quickly scale into a big problem. I sat at the table and opened the beach house expense sheet. The numbers stretched out. Property taxes, hurricane insurance, HOA dues, regular cleaning. Exterior paint after storm season, replacing a window pane etched by salt, roof maintenance. Those numbers are cold as steel, but they tie to warm details. Clean porch so kids' bare feet dan. Fatigue it splinters a sound roof, so a rainy night is peaceful. A quiet air conditioner so older relatives sleep well. I don't like using money as a cudgel. Just want to remind everyone that peace and ordered Dan tea drop onto the porch by themselves. At the sink, Kate rinsed her hands. You could hear warm water shift to cool by the thinner pitch of the stream. She set a dry towel on my shoulder. That was enough to nudge me back to the next task. Write a clear, short, non-argumentative message. It would summarize the Homeowners Association rules, require advance notice, state that the door code is for scheduled, approved use, and maintenance only, and note the afternoon scare as the reason we can't loosen up. I opened the Smart Lock app to review settings. A log line popped up. Last week, 2 wrong code attempts in a row, then it stopped. The timestamps were late afternoon prime time for people coming back from the beach. There was no video because only the doorbell has a camera. The dry numbers still raised the hair on my neck. They didn't name anyone, but they were a knock without words. I noted the times and saved screenshots to the beach house folder. Kate pulled out a chair and set her hand on my back, warm enough to close the cold gap that plunge had left in my chest. The path ahead was clearer. Move the boundary from silence to writing, from hints to commitments. Mom would feel torn, Dad would nod to keep the peace, my sisters would bristle at being managed. But after the water and the gasping at the pool's edge, I had no reason left to back off. I was halfway through drafting the message when a new alert lit the corner of my screen. The Outer Banks HOA sent a weekend advisory about a surge in visitors asking homeowners to check gate locks, porch lights, and front cameras. The note included a photo of a pickup truck parked over the line at the top of our street. License plate partly covered by a flyer the wind had slapped on. I zoomed in. In the distance, a familiar porch slipped into frame, same rail pattern I'd painted in the spring. Coincidence can be just that. But in my head, the afternoon sounds the latch click. The phone's small splash, the coughing when the kids broke the surface, returned all at once. I saved the photo, closed the laptop, and knew the next step wasn't optional. Before anyone came down for the weekend, every code, usage history, and access condition needed to be confirmed in writing. And if someone else was already a step ahead, I'd find out soon enough. That night, I sent a concise message to the whole family. A reminder of HOA rules, the requirement to give notice, and a clear statement that the door code is only for registered uses. I reread it twice to be sure it was plain, not snide, and left no room for misunderstanding. After I hit send, the screen went quiet like water settling after a ripple. I knew silence wasn't agreement. It was the breath before a reaction. Early the next morning, I left Raleigh while the roads were light. The car still held a faint thread of chlorine from my wet shirt hanging on the back seat, mixed with warm leather. On Highway 64, the first sun was dry and sharp, pines standing like stakes counting miles. The closer I got to the Outer Banks, the air shifted. Salt came up, and the marsh's Medan sand smelled thickened as I crossed the bridge. Wind hitting the car changed timbre, laying down low, steady bands like a big ship's fan at cruise. The gray-roofed house appeared after the curve, wide porch catching wind. The rail I'd painted in spring was dusted with tiny white salt flecks like chalk. I pulled in by the steps. The key in the lock made a crisp, dry sound. Inside smelled of damp wood and salt, pleasant for a waterside place, but a reminder to air it out. I opened the windows. Gulls passed with thin cries. The AC kicked on and lifted the curtains. First order of business: locks. I logged in, reset the master code, deleted every old guest code, and disabled link-based temporary codes entirely. Each confirmation chirped a small, hospital monitor beep. The lock log showed those 2 failed tries last week again, late afternoon. I screenshotted everything, a cool line running my spine, even though the house was warm. In the scheduled codes, there was a strange temporary code queued to activate this coming Friday at 5 p.m. The label wasn't in my naming style. I deleted it, turned on 2-factor authentication, changed the Wi-Fi password, updated the doorbell firmware, and routed motion alerts to both my phone and email. I walked the house like a tech doing inventory, tested smoke detectors, replaced fan remote's batteries, read the water meter. In the living room, a faint ribbon of fine sand lay along the rug, essage only, visible when the sun hit just right. The towel bin in the laundry cabinet had 2 towels still slightly damp, that mistrinsed blend of salt and detergent. 4 pairs of flip-flops on the rack, 1 pair caked with more sand than the others. In the kitchen cabinet, a sunscreen bottle sat open on a low shelf, not where I keep it. Each detail alone proved nothing, but together, they told a story with an odd rhythm. Out back, the wooden gate to the sandy yard still swung true, but the padlock showed more rust than the last time I oiled it. I oiled and worked it. The squeal dropped to acceptable. Out front, the drive was empty. I decided to add a chain and round padlock across the entry, not for theater, but so every entry leaves a mark in time. The chain clanked hard and bright. Cold weight steadied my shoulders like a brace. When the shackle clicked shut, it sounded like a sentence that finally fit. I posted a simple notice inside by the shoe shelf. Quiet hours, parking rules, trash, the HOA emergency number, big type, few lines, no frills. I planted 2 small no curbside parking stakes by the shrub line. The posts bit into packed sand with a taut creak, like a loose joint turned straight. At the mailbox, I found a few flyers for vacation cleaning services. One had a handwritten Friday afternoon slot and a local number, the tidy print of a seasoned employee. I set it on the counter and took a photo. My phone buzzed, the doorbell flagged motion. The screen showed someone across the street panning a camera as if confirming an address. A few beats later, the figure slipped behind a car at the end of the block. Far off, the surf sounded like a long, even growl. In the hall cabinet, I found a thin envelope sealed lightly. Inside was a basic guest sheet. Wi-Fi, password, trash directions, a map of nearby restaurants, not my font, laid out like the common templates online. In the margin, someone's neat handwriting added 2 lines about towels. I laid the envelope beside the lock screenshots and the cleaning flyer 3 puzzle pieces that matched. I still didn't have bank statements, but the links were forming. By noon, the sun was high, and the trash can S-warm plastic gave off a faint smell. I circled the house again, checked the fence, and raked the sand on the steps to erase old prints. In the garage, I shut the auxiliary water valve and hung a tag with instructions in case a pipe bursts when no one's home. I wrote my phone number under the emergency contact line in clear block letters. With everything set, I stood at the driveway and looked at the chain again. Midday heat had warmed the lock. The metal smell rose in my hand. Tires made that steady saw blade sound on asphalt up the street. A white SUV turned onto our road. It slowed at my gate. The passenger window dropped, and a phone came up, like checking a photo. Eyes scanned the lock and the no curbside parking signs. The SUV crept to the end of the block, turned around, and stopped a few houses down. My phone buzzed again, not the doorbell this time. A local number texted to say they'd be arriving earlier than expected, and asked why the gate had a new lock. I read it and felt my pulse notch up like watching the second hand tick a hair faster. The midday air was calm, but there was a dull note in the wind I couldn't ignore. I kept the screen up, eyes on the chain, and understood that by late afternoon, the only thing moving through this driveway might not be the breeze. The unknown number's text still sat open, crisp and confident, like someone confirming a standing appointment. Sunlight bounced off the phone's glass. Salt dust on the rail flashed like chalk. My heart shifted one gear, not fear, just stray pieces snapping together. I called back. A woman with a coastal accent answered quickly, speaking with the steady rhythm of long practice. I gave the address, explained the new chain, and asked who had scheduled service. The rest was short. The vacation cleaning company confirmed a standing Friday afternoon cleaning. Booked under initials that matched Brooke's name, with the note guests out 10 a.m., new guests 5 p.m. I didn't hear a confession. I heard procedure. That schedule had been running for months. A cool line ran my spine not from a C, but from realizing a rhythm had existed, and I was the last to map it. I went hunting for more. In the entry cabinet was a slim packet of printed sheets downloaded templates. Check-in instructions, Wi-Fi, trash, restaurant list. House rules in bold. The friendly tone of short-term rentals. A QR code in the corner led to a listing on a major platform. I scanned it. Up popped Seabreeze, OBX3BR Ocean Breeze. The photos showed our living room sofa I had reupholstered in the spring, the exact bench on the porch with the tiny white paint nick on its left leg. The calendar blocks showed what was open and booked. Almost every summer weekend was taken. 2-night rates were over $2,000 and up to Ward 3. A full week hit about $4,500, jumping past $5,000 on holidays. The cheap paper smelled a little sour. The AC hummed, but I still felt a pinch in my throat. My parents' house was publicly listed as a commercial asset, and those green calendar blocks said that wheel had been spinning for a while. Captured the calendar and rates, saved the link. In the mail stack were 2 more cleaner flyers with handwritten slots, a thin envelope marked guest with instructions, and on the kitchen counter an old printed checkout checklist. The corner sun-faded. Side by side they told a story without dialogue. I didn't have anyone's bank printouts. But the money path was easy to picture. $2,000 to $3,000 for a weekend, $4,000 to $5,000 for a week, multiplied across the season. And none of that showed up in insurance, taxes, maintenance, or any official expense I see. I reopened the lock app. Those 2 failed entries hit at 4:55 p.m., last week exactly when anew. Guest might try an old code before texting the host. In the scheduled section, the odd temporary code I'd deleted that morning still left a ghost note. Guest initials, number of adults, number of children.
House.
Scrolling, it felt like reading someone else's flight board, not my own house. In my ear, the distant surf was along. Even Beslanen under it, I could hear another rumble. A car pulling in, suitcases rolling, laughter on the porch. Back at the table, I added a column to the expense sheet. Booked dates per listing. I filled in the sold-out days I'd just captured. The next column, responsible party, I left blank. The next revenue, blank as well. No money in the ledger, but plenty of signs money was passing through the house. I remembered scattered details from past months, the trash can sitting left of usual on a morning without pickup, fine sand along the living room rug on a Monday afternoon, a sunscreen bottle on the low shelf, even though Mom keeps hers high, the AC flipping on before dawn once. When I set those next to the cleaner's guests out 10, knew at 5 it became a loop. Guests leave, cleaning, guests arrive, gate opens, code activates, people in. The whole thing had been running like a little hotel. I took another lap. A small bedroom. The sheetfolds weren't Mom's. In the nightstand drawer was a card that read, Wi-Fi, enjoy your stay. Same font as the check-in template. In the garage, a plastic bucket sat off-center and smelled sharper of cleaning chemicals than usual. Each small item flashed the same green light. Back on the front porch, I looked at the new chain lock. Sun had warmed the metal. My hand left a dull print. A white SUV reappeared, slower this time. It stopped across the street. The passenger window dropped, and a phone rose. The lens pointed at the house number on the post, and then at the chain. The tires sounded patient on the asphalt, the sound of someone who believes they on time and at the right place. My pocket buzzed. The doorbell pushed the same frame to my phone. The passenger looked right into the camera, eyes scanning, just ticking a box. I didn't open the gate. I don't owe an explanation for a schedule I never agreed to. I stood still on the porch, felt the AC draft touch my neck, heard the surf's steady pour, and smelled salt slip through the curtains. In that quiet, another sound chimed from the kitchen. A new email. I opened it. The HOA sent an update to residents on our street. It restated the short-term rental rules. Owner registration required, parking limits, maximum occupancy, and penalties up to reporting to the town. Attached was the list of registered properties for the season. I skimmed. Our house number wasn't there. I drew a deep breath. The salt in the air came through sharper, like a thin blade. This was no longer something I could handle in the family. It was a neighborhood rules violation, an insurance risk, and a legal liability if anything went wrong. I captured the HOA's registered homes list and saved it with the calendar screenshots. The screen reflected a slice of my face, the lines tighter. Out on the street, the white SUV shifted position, eased back, then rolled off toward the end of the block. The engine passed like a long sigh. I knew the next step couldn't be a family group text. I needed boots on the ground, eyes on the house when I was in their end, control over anything that could turn into criminal exposure if pushed. I pulled up an HOA-recommended property manager from an old newsletter and noted what they offer. Routine checks, alarm response, and collecting evidence of violations when needed. My finger hovered over the call button, then moved. I wrote an email first summary of the situation, photos attached, request for a quote, and a same-day walkthrough. As I hit send, the smart lock chirped a quick series of beeps. The little keypad on the porch flashed red 3 times wrong code attempts. It lit again, then again. Finally, it went back to idle. On my phone, the lock log updated. 4 failed entries in a row at 4:47 p.m. Beyond the pines, late daylight dropped like a slow curtain. Right after the keypad flashed red, my phone vibrated. Connor's name filled the screen. The ringtone sounded dry, like metal on glass. I answered into wind noise and tire hum. He said he was on the beach road, demanded to know why the gate was chained, and told me to open it now. He pressed the point about a guest deposit and warned that if I didn't open up, money would be lost and the family would look bad. When I reminded him this was my parents' house and unregistered short-term renting violates HOA rules and voids insurance, he changed tone and said he'd handle it himself, even naming the exact tools that could cut a chain. I could hear a faint clink of metal on metal through the phone, like a demonstration. I ended the call, saved a note to the log, and took screenshots. I opened the Dare County Sheriff's non-emergency contact page and sent a summary address. Time, threats to cut the chain, multiple failed code entries, the public rental listing screenshots I'd found, and confirmation from the HOA that the house was not registered for short-term rentals. I didn't ask them to come out immediately. I wanted an official paper trail starting now. Sent a second packet to the HOA with the same materials, asking them to acknowledge and advise if there was an intrusion. Then came the hands-on part. I printed a simple sign. No trespassing. Cameras in use. Owner will contact police. Big letters. White background, and posted one inside the gate and one by the garage door. I rechecked every camera. Front door, back porch, gate corner, garage side. I dropped the gate camera a little to catch hands at the chain. Tested the built-in speaker. The warning tone was clear and loud. I set motion alerts to go to two devices, mine and the property manager's on-call phone. The local manager arrived sooner than expected. Sea wind pushed a salt wave onto the porch. Her nylon jackets rustled, sunscreen faint in the air. We walked the perimeter. They recommended an additional padlock for the tool closet, moving the ladder indoors and bundling yard hoses high so they couldn't be used to climb. They also suggested a secondary chain across the driveway, set back one car length inside the gate, so even if someone shoved the gate, they'd be stopped midway. I agreed. The fresh chain rang sharp and cold, like a small hammer tapping with purpose. They photographed everything, took a spare key, confirmed 2 drive-bys each evening for the next few days, and listed a live on-call number for alerts. We settled the monthly fee. I sent the payment and watched the complete checkmark flash like a small nod. The garage. I turned off the auxiliary water valve and hung a clear tag with instructions. I killed power to the outdoor outlets except the camera feed. The breaker clicked down. The porch lights went dark, leaving only the little red camera eye. I added a padlock to the tool closet. Spare key went on a dedicated ring in a zippered pocket. I greased the rear yard gate hinges. The squeak disappeared. Everything snapped to a level I could trust. My phone buzzed again, this time Brooke. Her messages came fast asking why I was making it a big deal, insisting a weekend plan for friends was set, saying I was embarrassing the family in front of acquaintances, and repeating that family should yield to family. I replied briefly, HOA rules summarized, their email referenced, legal boundary emphasized. She fired back that registration was just a formality and urged me not to be bureaucratic. Last note implied that if I didn't open up, they would by other means. I took screenshots and filed them in the evidence folder with date-time names. Mom called next, her voice thinned by wind on the line. I could hear surf and a flag's whip on her patio. She asked me not to push things to the point of breaking relationships. I told her what I had: a public listing, a standing cleaning schedule, a strange timed code, and the HOA's official list showing no registration. I said the risk had moved beyond dinner table debates into insurance coverage and legal responsibility if anything happened. She was quiet for a few seconds, sighed, asked me to keep the house safe, and said she'd try to speak to my sisters. Her voice sounded like a window closing softly, not angry, just tired. The afternoon slid by. Angled light made the salt dust sparkle on the porch rail, the kind of detail you miss at noon. I stood at the head of the drive looking at both locked chains, trying to picture the worst case and find the gaps. I ran the checklist in my head. Front gate chained. Driveway secondary chain. Front door coded. Back door inside bar. Tool closet padlock. Water valve off, cameras live. Alerts 2 numbers. Signs posted. HOA notified. Sheriff. Sedent file open.
My shoulders dropped half an inch. Dusk came. The sea wind got a metallic chill. The camera app switched to night mode. Gulls faded, and insects took the channel with a dry crackle. I was about to leave for Raleigh when a motion alert pulsed. Gate camera detected a person.
The screen went black-green. 2 headlights swung across the driveway and stopped at the chain. The mic picked up an idling engine, then silence. Doors opened. Shoes ground gravel. 2 big silhouettes stepped into frame broad-shouldered, sure of themselves. One bent to the lock and tugged. The chain rang. The other moved behind with a long, curved-handled tool. In the headlights, the gray metal looked like a blade. I triggered the remote warning. The speaker barked like a short siren. Both heads snapped toward the camera. One hand flew up to shade a face. Metal kissed metal thin. Testing. On my phone, a second banner slid in. The porch camera saw motion too. The time bar ticked from 7:26 to 7:27. My heart picked up. The gate wasn't their only target. The warning echoed, and they backed up half a step. Headlights washed the chain and clicked off. The porch camera caught a quick frame. Someone pressed close to the glass. A large hand over part of the lens, breath fogging the pane. Then they slid out of view. Only the red dot pulsed, and far surf droned like a compressor that never stops. The manager called right back. They were at the end of the block, with amber hazard lights flashing, radio crackling. I stayed on while they checked the exterior. Shoes on gravel sounded firm, deliberate. 2 minutes later, the report came. No one on site. Vehicle gone. chain intact. No pry marks on the porch. I asked for photos with timestamps and set all motion alerts to forward to their duty phone in real time. That was the first night I learned what it feels like to live on notifications. The phone took on a sea breeze rhythm, the neighbor's flag drifting into frame, a cat padding across the steps, a pine branch scraping the lens like a black stroke. Every object near enough made my heart add a beat. Close to midnight, the feed steadied. Night vision green settled, only tiny blinks as insects flickered past. I dozed on the sofa, the smell of salt and damp wood pooling at the cracked window. Morning light cut across the rail and revealed chalky salt streaks on the handhold. The manager returned with a notebook and toolkit. We walked each point. Gate latch, chain, lock body. Right at the keyway was a hair-thin new scratch. The polish peeled to a pinhead spot, raw metal showing. On the pavement below lay a dusting of fine gray specks, fresh metal grindings. Not much, but enough to say last night wasn't just testing the chain. I added another layer, a separate padlock on the tool closet. The ladder moved into the garage and cinched with wire and a lead seal. Garden hoses coiled and hung high. The manager proposed magnetic door sensors on the 2 secondary doors tied into the existing system, so alerts sync across devices. I agreed. The pairing beep was short and crisp. The HOA answered my email. They restated the short-term rental rules, the reporting process, and gave an after-hours number. They acknowledged the listing photos I'd sent, noted the interior match to our address, and urged me to hard secure the property while they contacted the titled owners. A note from the sheriff's office followed. Incident file opened. If anyone breaches, call 911 and leave the scene undisturbed. Between the technical steps, there was still family to address. I sent a short, structured update to the group. The house is not registered for rentals. Someone approached the property last night. The legal line has been crossed. All use is paused until the HOA matter is resolved. Silence held for a while, then dribbles came in. That I was overreacting, that I'd embarrassed friends. In the stream was one from Mom. She wanted to avoid a meltdown Thanksgiving and asked that, if we gather, we choose a neutral place that week. I understood she was trying to pull everyone back from the cliff. I agreed to rent a different house for Thanksgiving. Big enough, inland, easier for elders and kids. Nowhere near the Outer Banks HOA. I sent quotes, put down a deposit, got the confirmation. My parents exhaled like people who hate cleaning up battlefields. I scheduled nightly patrols with the manager for the whole holiday week, in case someone tried to test the lines. The next 2 days were quiet on the surface. The cameras sent harmless clips. The neighbor's cat taking the stairs, a pine needle drop, a flyer tucked on the step by a fishing charter. I got used to the little beep, like a resting heart rate. Inside, the open windows aired out dry wood. Floors were clean, towels were washed, dried, and folded my way. The little misalignments had been pulled back to square. The house felt upright again. On the evening before I drove back to Raleigh, I sat on the front steps with a glass, sweating in my hand. The air was still, the surf muttered low, a pine scrub whispered at the dune. The lock app chimed a short alert, one incorrect code entry, then nothing. The log stamped 7:02 p. I stood and checked the feet-empty frame, only a neighbor's window shadow across the street. The manager parked at the block's end, saw no unfamiliar cars, and swung Beano 1 at the gate. I added a note. Someone who knows where the keypad is tends to try once and pull back. In the morning, I locked up, handed the spare to the manager, and left the Outer Banks. The road home arced across the marshes, brackish mud, and the air tires ticking. Each bridge seemed like a big clock. On the way, the HOA sent a holiday update. Extra patrols, please report unfamiliar people near homes after dark. I acknowledged, listing the equipment and maintenance I'd just completed. Family tension dipped slightly when Mom confirmed the neutral Thanksgiving rental. I kept my distance from my sisters and sent my parents one daily property status line. Systems normal, no unusual alerts, patrols completed. Even so, that taut string at the back of my neck stayed. Wasn't jerking like the first night, but it wasn't slack. Late afternoon, just before I left the office in Raleigh, 2 alerts hit back to back. Gate camera and porch camera. The night vision black-green frames were less than a minute apart. At the gate, a pickup stopped nose to chain. Headlights washed over the cameras in use sign. On the porch, the lens fixed on a long metal tool leaned against the step. Rubber-capped handle, dark gray body. I zoomed in. Cutting edge wore a dusting of metal filings. The audio track carried a thin, half-second whine, like a battery cutter kissing a lock. The manager texted they were en route. The sheriff's office said a cruiser was nearby. I stood in my living room in Raleigh, the clean wood and laundry scent familiar, and still the hair rose on my forearms, as if I were on that porch. On screen, the gate headlights blinked once, some kind of signal. The frame trembled as the camera adjusted. Just when it looked like they might back off, a third alert rolled across the top. The side door had detected unusual movement. In that instant, I knew the lull had only been a breath. The next part wouldn't be testing and talk. It would smell like scorched metal, whine like a cutter, and the incident file would move off the screen and into a case number. The third alert landed like a tap of metal on glass. Side door anomaly, while the gate and porch feeds were still rolling. In the frame, headlights slashed the drive. Shadows stretched, then stopped right at the chain. The cutter's whine came through the porch mic high, steady, cold as a tiny saw biting steel. Sparks danced in short sprays. The camera caught them as quick white flecks jumping at ground level. I hit the warning speaker again. The tone boomed and cut off. Two figures staggered half a step and turned their faces to the lens. Broad shoulders, chins up, the kind of stride that says they know the yard. The porch cam grabbed another slice. A big hand flat on the window glass, breath fogging. The long gray tool resting at the step, rubber cap at the handle. I recognized the stance of the cutter, the set of the feet, the wrist. S-angle before the blade meets the lock, the choreography I VO watched at backyard get-togethers, when certain men take pride in anything made of metal. I called 911, gave the exact address, described what I was seeing, noted the prior incident file, and said the local manager was nearby. The dispatcher confirmed a unit in the area and kept me on the line. I alerted the manager at the same time. They said they were turning onto the block, amber lights on, radio up. The cutter's tone shifted higher, deeper bite. The gate cam showed a fresh, bright score on the lock body, the polished finish peeled like a fingernail's width. Porch wind worked the cutter's shirt tail. The offhand tightened into tendons. At the side door, the other hand tested the hinges lift, drop mapping weak points by habit. Streak of blue and red suddenly swept across the pavement. A patrol car gave one short chirp enough to slice the dense air at the end of the block. The two figures jerked, yanked the cutter off the lock, the rushed motion scraping the blade against the chain with a shrill note. One man bent, snatched something off the porch step, and hustled around the front of the truck. The door swung wide, headlights flaring in the camera. For a split second, I saw a face and neck clearly enough to recognize the features. The dark ball cap he always wears, the squared jaw, the habitual backward glance over the shoulder. The other cut across the gate, shoulders braced, climbing in fast and sure like he was doing his own job. Headlights popped on. The truck shot into a sharp reverse, fishtailed once, then glided to the end of the street. The property manager parked at an angle across my drive, amber flashers making a safe triangle with the arriving cruiser. Their flashlights swept the gate, stopping at the fresh score on the lock body and the thin sprinkle of gray metal dust on the ground. A small black canvas pouch lay by the porch step zipper, worn the way tools get worn. With gloves on, the manager lifted it, snapped photos, and dropped it into a temporary evidence bag. A faint handprint smudged the side door handle, a little ribbon of grease catching the beam. They photographed everything from clean angles. Timestamps read clearly. The cruiser turned down the block. The gate cam caught one more wash of blue-red at the intersection, then quiet fell. I exhaled, but my heart stayed high. My shirt stuck to the chair despite the Raleigh living room being cool. Under the kitchen light, my phone lit with the manager S update. White truck stopped at the three-way. Driver claimed he was there to pick something up for a relative. In the trunk, bolt cutters and a battery grinder. A house-cleaning business card sat nearby. I saved the images and zoomed the plate last for digits, matched what my camera caught 2 nights ago, when the same truck crept past checking house numbers. The phone buzzed again. Mom texted, "Call me now." When I did, her voice came fast, low, but dense. She said she had dialed 911 as soon as the string of alerts hit, and while she was listening to me describe it, she was afraid that a minute's delay would have put someone inside the house. Her breathing sounded like pages being turned steady, but worried. She said she would speak directly to my sisters. I understood anew why my story always starts with, "The first 911 call wasn't tea from me." She sees the crack before I do. She just keeps hoping it will seal itself with a family meal. I bundled a fresh packet for the HOA and the sheriff. Plate photos, tool photos, the locks, score marks, the wrong code log, and the public rental listing with name and calendar. In the description, I spelled out the interior match and the booking cadence. And I underlined that our address did not appear on the HOA's registered list. The packet went out. The system returned a success banner, like a red stamp smacking paper. The night settled again. The cameras went back to black-green, blinking only when an insect crossed. The sea breeze cooled. Humidity dropped. Pine needles rattled drier. The manager did one last loop, photographed gate and porch, then secured the garage with a fresh padlock. They asked me to stop by their office in the morning to sign a standing authorization, allowing them to act as primary contact during incidents. I agreed and added it to the list. Next morning, my phone chimed with an update. The patrol unit had written up the vehicle stop. The driver said he was picking up the house for family and that he couldn't get the gate open because of a new lock. The note requested owner confirmation of access rights. Otherwise, any return would be treated as trespass. I printed the report and set it on the growing stack. Before I could file it, the family chat exploded. A rush of messages accused me of disgracing the family, said friends were humiliated having to turn around, that if I'd just opened the gate, everything would have been fine. Buried in the noise was a new detail. Cash deposit had been taken for the upcoming weekend, booked by a friend of a friend, with initials matching the person whose cleaning business card turned up in the pouch on my porch. That accidental admission closed the loop. I sat at the table and flattened my palms on the cool wood to slow my pulse. Sign. Sign full authorization for the property manager. File for a no trespass order against the two men captured on camera. And send a formal notice suspending all family use requests until the HOA matter is resolved. The cold chain of legal tasks wasn't optional anymore. Once a battery grinder hits a lock, you're on rails. Just as I opened the no trespass form, another camera alert blinked. Movement at the gate. The feed showed the white SUV pulled in closer than before. Passenger door cracked open. A hand came up not holding a tool, but a thin white packet of papers with metal binder clips peeking at the top. The packet tapped the chain lightly, a polite knock. In the corner, I recognized the seal, the HOAS logo. The packet with the HOA logo touched the chain and was set by the gate, the binder clip cold and metallic. The cover page cited an unregistered short-term rental violation, a link to an emergency online meeting, the rules on guests and parking, and instructions for submitting evidence. Underneath was a thin set of forms: authorization for management and police to handle trespassers, an emergency contact registration, and a sheet showing exactly how to post compliant warning signs. The paper smelled of fresh ink and salt. To the touch, it was faintly rough. I called the number on the letter. The staffer's voice was brisk. They confirmed receipt of my materials, the public listing with interior match, the plate photos, the cut marks, the failed code log. They recommended I sign the on-site authority form immediately so local responders could act, and invited me to the same-day emergency meeting to suspend all rental activity at our address. The call ended with a 24-hour checklist. Post the standard signs. Email the signed authorization, designate the local manager as primary contact, and add extra patrols. I signed and sent. The mouse ticked softly across the fields. Each line appeared like chalk drawing a boundary. The local manager arrived 10 minutes later, sunscreen and plastic bin smells riding a salty gust onto the porch. We mounted the HOA standard signs in 2 spots, one at the gate, one by the side door. Screws bit the wood with dry, certain sounds. I printed a temporary suspension of use notice and taped it inside the glass. The emergency online meeting ran fast. 3 squares on screen: the HOA rep, me, and the community council. They went straight to the record what I'd sent, with timestamps and images, and announced a violation case would be opened against the titled owners, my parents. They also logged that I had chained the gate, added devices, signed authority, and hired a local manager. They recommended I apply for a no trespass order naming the 2 men on camera with tools based on last night's report. I acknowledged and downloaded the forms from their link, and my fingers moving dry and steady over the keys, like laying boards into a frame. By late afternoon, the wind eased and sunlight pulled back from the porch, leaving the salt freckles on the rail bright and plain. I taped a copy of the signed authority behind the glass and listed the manager as emergency contact. My phone buzzed. The sheriff's office confirmed receipt of the authorization and noted that from now on, deputies could act without calling the owner first, so long as the evidence was on site. A short line of text took another ounce off my shoulders. Just when it seemed everything was finally in its lanes, the gate cam grabbed a white pickup, stopping nose 2 chain again. The porch mic caught a door open, and the wind whistling along the truck's flank. Both men got out, moving with the confidence of familiarity. One scanned the new warning sign, then the keypad, like measuring reach. The other carried a fresh black pouch, zipper flashing under late light. Their eyes didn't linger on the gate. Porch cam caught a shadow sliding across the glass, a big hand testing the side door handle, the old weightlift drop. Listen to the hinge. I left the speaker muted this time. I stayed still, sent the pin to the manager, and called 911, reading off the signed authorization. The dispatcher asked me to hold. The cruiser was near the intersection. Through the phone, I could hear the manager's nylon gloves whispering. They were pulling into the block with amber lights on. The grinder didn't even get a chance to whine before blue-red streaked the driveway. The siren blipped. The street air split. The two stepped back, but not fast enough to scoop their gear. The pouch sat open on the step, bolt cutter's handle sticking out. An officer moved in, voice low and level. His radio murmured codes. The manager stood off to the side while a flashlight swept the lock, the previous night's scratch flashing back. Another officer opened the pouch. Latex snapped on metal as he pulled out the battery grinder, a few rags, and a house-cleaning business card tucked in a side sleeve. No theatrics, just practice steps. Document, cuff, Miranda, into the car.
What?
Blue-red washed the porch boards and blinked across the new sign like a heart monitor.
What?
The breeze carried salt deeper into the hall with a rubber hint from fresh gloves. Mom texted that she'd also called 911 when the alert stack hit. She wrote she wasn't going to wait another hour for bad news. Again, the first call wasn't mine. She's the one who pulls the fire alarm, while the rest of us argue whether we smell smoke. The manager sent a photo set, chain and lock, tool bag, license plate, faces lit by cruiser lights, the temporary report with timestamps. The sheriff followed with a link and preliminary case number, trespass with burglary tools. I saved everything to the case folder with date-time names. The HOA sent another update. The property was flagged for monitoring. All usage requests had to go through them, while the violation case was pending. The meeting would proceed on schedule the next day. Night deepened. Insects took over the airwaves, a fine, even patter like distant rain. I sat on the porch, palm on the dry wood, grain faint against my skin. The salt and metal smell faded, leaving wood and wind. The part of me that likes things neat and quiet felt the house settle upright after weeks of being pulled sideways. The son in me knew the next fight would be harder. The dining table, the roundabout phrases, the demands dressed as family. The phone buzzed again. The HOA confirmed the meeting time and asked that my parents attend to close the loop. The last line sat heavy and light at once. The screen door bumped shut with the tiniest knock. Down the block, patrol lights were dark. The sea breeze cooled like a damp cloth on a forehead. Everything slid into its tracks with one long breath. And just before I killed the porch light, my screen lit with a platform notification. Seabreeze OBX3BR Ocean Breeze had been removed for violations. The note said the listed owner was under review. That thin line closed the intrusion chapter and opened another. Tomorrow's meeting wouldn't just be about chains and signs. It would be about who had been steering the money through this house. Morning brought the online meeting. My Raleigh office was cool. My coffee smelled freshly roasted, steam thinning into the fan's steady whisper. Sun angled through the blinds and drew light bands across the file stack. The lock S-cut marks. The public listing calendar, wrong code, timestamps, patrol report, signed authorization. 3 video squares came up. The HOA rep went straight to the point. Unregistered short-term rental violations, insurance exposure. On-camera evidence of an attempted breach with tools, and the platform's removal of the listing after our report. The community attorney spoke evenly, laying out tiers of consequence. Fines, immediate cease and desist on all rental activity, the option to submit a proper registration if there's any future intent to operate, and referral to the town if there's a repeat. The shared document listed steps in bold like tendons under skin. My parents joined from their living room. I could see the familiar stainless kettle in the corner. Dad sat straight, eyes on the screen. Mom laced and unlaced her fingers until her breathing leveled as the HOA summarized. My sisters popped in briefly, then shut their cameras off. Through the thin laptop speaker, they said they were just helping friends, that the cleaning card was left behind by someone, that it's been blown out of proportion. The HOA rep simply restated the record. A weekly cadence of bookings, exact interior matches. Burglary tools recovered at the scene, and our address absent from the season's registration roll. My room was cool, but heat rose along my spine in small patches, the kind that comes when conclusions land exactly where you wish they wouldn't. When it came time to vote, the HOA required the titled owners to sign a stop-use commitment, accept the initial fine, designate the local manager as primary point of contact, and authorize patrol to act without calling first. Dad said he'd sign. Mom asked about the no trespass process for the 2 men on camera, and they walked her through it. I felt a tiny vibration through the desk as my fingertips tapped the confirmation with the signed files. The soft ding sounded like a stamp hitting paper. The family part after the meeting was the harder piece. In my parents' kitchen, dish soap and old varnish scented the air. The wall clock ticked like a reminder that minutes aren't infinite. I kept it short. House use paused for everyone except maintenance. All access codes moved under management. Nightly patrols through the holiday. No trespass paperwork filed today. Future requests, if any, must follow the legal route. Dad looked straight at me and nodded like a man who'd picked the lane. Mom set her hand on the table edge with just enough pressure to flatten her fingers. Her nails stopped biting her palm. My sisters responded with a long silence. Then indirect messages to Mom saying I'd turned a small thing into a big one, that paperwork had made family feel like outsiders. Mixed in were screenshots on Mom's S-phone from a payment app, deposits across the summer months into a personal account, notes matching the listing's abbreviations, dollar amounts aligned to those solid green calendar blocks. Mom looked over at me with the tiredness of someone watching loose threads braid into a rope. The air in the house shifted. The quiet wasn't a pause, it was an ending. That afternoon, the sheriff sent the formal case numbers for the no trespass orders naming the 2 men from the night before. The manager confirmed they had the signed authority as primary contact. The HOA issued a short notice. Violation case opened, initial fine assessed, property flagged for the season, and any changes to access must be registered. I printed it all and clipped it into the binder under tabs labeled security, legal, and financial. Dinner in Raleigh was quiet with hardly any clink of silverware. Kate set her hand on my shoulder as I sat. Her palm was warm, like a cool cloth laid over a muscle that had just stopped tightening. I told her the path forward was clear. Lock every entry, let systems and professionals watch the house, move family conversations from talk to writing. Build a long-term governance frame for the property. She nodded, and a cool sip of lemonade cut the salty edge that still seemed to cling to my throat from that first afternoon by my parents' pool. Early the next morning, Dad asked me to come by. When I arrived, angled sun laid a neat round maple shadow on the grass. He placed a thin folder on the kitchen table, crisp paper inside, flat and new. He spoke the way Southerners do when a decision is made. Not many words, the weight is in the pen. We would transfer the beach house into a family trust, name the property manager as the operator, give me authority to approve access and change codes. Any family use would be scheduled and signed like guests. With a maintenance fee, all revenue, if any, would go through the trust account to cover operating costs and reserves, with what's left used for my parents' getaways. Mom sat beside him, shoulders dropping the way they do when a long drive ends in a shady parking spot. I picked up the pen. Faint ink smell was like new paper. The nib scratched lightly where I signed. A snug frame rose around a house that had been treated as an unconditional gathering spot. It wasn't about me trying to rule.
Out of frame.
A house tilts. Dad set his hand on my shoulder. Cool, steady with weight, but not pressure like a stone laid just right to steady a post. That's his quiet kind of backing. Thanksgiving drew near. The neutral rental was booked. Mom sent a menu with a peach cobbler in the style our Raleigh neighbor loves. Dad made a quick, dry joke with a wink about hoping the pie cools at the right time and dose and tea end up in the hands of anyone sprinting. In our own kitchen, the oven ticked as it preheated. The smell of pastry crust edged into butter. A settled feeling returned, the kind you get on nights when there is no patrol siren in your head. My phone stayed still for a long stretch, only twitching when a camera caught the neighbor cat slipping across the Outer Banks steps. That evening, just as I cleared the table, a bank alert popped. The trust had received its first transfer from my parents' joint account to cover the initial fine in the reserve. The description line sat straight like an underline. I saved the receipt and set the phone down. From the kitchen window, a cool draft carried the scent of dry leaves into the room, like the hallways by the ocean at dawn when no one's out yet. Before bed, I opened the lock app again. The log was quiet, only the periodic system pings, a resting heartbeat. In the user list, every extra code was gone. Only the manager and maintenance remained. I closed the app. The cool glass under my hand felt like sliding a bolt home. A few minutes later, the phone hummed once more. The family group posted a single new line, short, no emojis, no preface. Both sisters would arrive at the neutral rental on time and bring dessert. The words lay flat as water on a windless pond. I didn't label it reconciliation or a timeout. I just noted that the noise had dropped a notch. Night settled. In the yard, dry leaves whispered on the ground. In the Outer Banks feed, the porch framed a calm black-green square. The ocean still roared, but it sounded a little farther off. Our back door closed with a small, tidy knock. The story ends there not because everyone changed, but because the house now has a frame, and the boundary has been written, signed, and singed with metal thick enough that when a cutter touches it, the screech wakes everyone up before it's too late. Right before I shut the light, a short thought passed. Next summer, if we want kids' footsteps on the deck and the smell of peach cobbler in the kitchen, I can still open the door, but this time there will be a named booking, compliant signage, a live phone line, and hands drying the floor before anyone slips. That's the final mini-twist. Not a permanent lock, but a conditional open. And that condition is, in the end, a way to keep a family at the same table without tilting the house. If you've gone through something like this, comment 1. If you want me to keep telling this story, comment 2.